Hey everyone, welcome to our brain boosting strategies to close more conversations. I'm so honored to be participating in this and leading you through a chat with my new friend Jade. I'm so excited that she's been able to take time to love on us and share her knowledge. I'm going to bring her on in a second. And I'm in a coaching program for, look at my my webcam. This is what happens when your husband uses your office. Can anyone relate? Oh, well. So I'm in a coaching program and I was going through the content and there was this interview and it just pulled me in. I was like, this is refreshing. This is a refreshing conversation. This is real conversation. And this is the type of discussions that we need to be having. There's too much, copy paste and cold messaging and just not seeing people as people out there. And you guys know how passionate I am about building relationships, offering value, and learning how to really connect with people. And now more than ever, this is so important, you guys. So for those of you that are on live, we want you to actively participate. If you registered, you'll get the replay of this. So feel free to listen in today. Any ahas, jot them down, but I really want you to take in this conversation with Jade today. And we want to let her know who's tuning in. So while I bring her on in the chat, I want you guys to drop in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from, city, state, province, country, and the number one struggle you have when it comes to closing conversations. Is it you don't know how to bring up what you do? Is it that you're not identifying people's pain points? Or are you not sure of how to bring your story in a way that's genuine and authentic and can really connect with that person, okay? So drop it in the chat so Jade knows a little bit about you. And Jade, I'm gonna bring you on and promote you to panelist. So hopefully our Zoom capabilities are working with us today. There you are. Hi, Jade. So excited to have you on. What's up, girlfriend?
Likewise. Hello.
Hi. Oh, girl, I'm so excited that you could take time out of your busy schedule to do this today. Thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yay.
And
okay.
I'm kidding. I need to fix my audio. So
okay.
Let me just do this really quick.
Okay. So everyone is chatting or dropping in the chat where you're tuning in from. And we also would love to know, what is your number one struggle when it comes to conversation? So everyone's saying hello. Tips I'm bringing up to start the conversation. Okay, so not even when you're even in the thick of it, but how to even start, which I know that's your forte, Jade, is helping people stand out. So Jade, can you share a little bit about your background? Because your bio is extensive. We put it in the webinar registration. Competitive gymnast, neuroscientist, and you have a coaching program where you help people like me and my audience to stand out on social media, to stand out with their story. But can you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my apologies. Let me see if I can get my audio. Is this,
We
can you still hear me?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
You can?
Yeah.
Let me do this. Okay. So yeah, so a little bit of background about myself. I'm still getting this weird echo.
Oh, I've had that happen before. It's hard to think when you're talking. Do you want to maybe
I'm going to try.
Okay. Say
Let me
maybe you can take your earbuds out. Let me mute myself. Let me see if that happens when you're talking.
I'm going to try this.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself.
All right, we'll go with this. Yes, there we go. Love tech. So I'll share a little bit of a brief story, and pardon I've got an echo, but let me try this. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna go with this for now. So I have to say, I have a medical background. I started out thinking I am going to go to med school, I'm gonna change the world. And I realized about a couple of months before I was gonna go to med school, like, I don't like blood. Why am I even doing this? And this is a critical component, right, of going to med school. And at that point in time, I had taken some extra psychology classes and I fell in love with neuroscience. And at that point in time, there weren't really the fMRI machines that we see now. It's very commonplace now to just put people in the scanner and take a picture of their brain and see what's going on. But at that point in time, there wasn't a lot of that. So I picked up my bags. I dropped my med school plans and packed my bags, and I moved to London, where I knew no one, because it was one of like 3 schools at that point in time. They were really doing the brain scanner research. So that is what got me started. And initially I started out on the clinical side of things, because that's where the business was when I first got out of grad school. And then I quickly discovered that there's a really interesting overlap here with how we even communicate with each other, how we talk. I specialized in emotion, so that was my area of expertise. And we had this wonderful, I think many of us, we grew up thinking emotion was bad, that we were wrong for some reason for even expressing emotion. But you know what? I think there's quite a few women on the line, so I don't want to alienate any of the men.
Mostly women.
But, yeah, so hopefully, yeah. But just to say, a lot of women get pegged as being emotional, but it's an incredible asset for us. And most women actually end up making better decisions, because we are taught, we're socialized in many ways to actually tap into our emotions. So the better we are at doing that, often the better conversation that we can have with people. So I was really fascinated by that, and just found the overlap, and over time started working with a lot of Fortune 100 companies. I currently work with an organization where we take neuroscience research and we apply it into an organizational setting. I work with all of the household names that are keeping us sane during the pandemic. Those are all of my clients.
Thank you.
But yeah, so that's kind of how that happened. And then I realized, sorry, just odd audio. But a couple of years ago, I started this new job, and I realized very quickly that while I love the science and I love to talk about all of that in-depth science, my clients, I would get a couple of sentences in and they were lost. They're like, this is interesting, but how does it relate to me? How does it apply? And so I recognized quickly, I have to find a way to communicate these complex scientific concepts in a way that feels relatable and in a way that they can understand. So that's what got me started on this journey of really trying to unpack, what is it that makes us connect? What are those, how do we create those real, authentic connections with people? So
that's amazing. I think you were the one that said it, and I can type my questions in the chat for you if that's easier. Let me know. But I thought you'd said that, and if it wasn't you, I'm sure you can speak to it, but people won't tell you their struggles unless they think you can help them. And I think this is what I'm noticing with my audience. They are pitching. So they're trying to say, I've got this thing, like, here's my coat, and I've got this stuff, and it's helped a lot of people with things. Do you want to buy some? And they're missing the part to say, what's going on with you? Like, let's talk about you. So for them that are just getting those conversations going, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, there's a wonderful tool that I like to use and have. And what that is, each of us within our brain, you all probably have heard this term, amygdala hijack. Have you all heard that term? So what that means is that the emotional centers of our brain have taken over, and we're no longer really able to think from that high level. So no amount of positive thinking or shifting your mindset is really going to help when you're in an amygdala hijack. So from a client perspective, how do we help get into those emotional needs for people and creating that space for that warmth and credibility? So there's a little tool that I like to use, and it is called SCARF, and you may have heard me talk about this. And what it is, it's just an acronym for all of the different triggers that we have from a social perspective. So the S in SCARF stands for something called status. So when you are having a conversation with a client or potential client, how can you show that they have value? So how, and that's what's coming up for people is, do you value me? Am I someone that you respect? And so that is what the S stands for. So thinking about when we're having those conversations with clients, how do we tap into that? And then another thing that we can see, depending on your particular situation or particular conversation, the C stands for certainty. And what that means is, do I have enough detail to make a decision? And some people prefer different levels of detail. So you may have a client who, you know, needs additional reflection time, or they may be the ones who want to get on the phone with you and talk through all of the little details. And that's just an indicator to you that there's a certainty need there that you may want to meet for them. And especially in our current environment, because there are so many unknowns right now, that is one that's really challenging for people to meet. And there's a lot of that going beneath the surface that people want to be able to predict so they can make decisions as a survival mechanism. But because we don't necessarily have that luxury, that the world looks very different than it has to us, at least in recent history. And so because of that, you may see this coming up for people more often, and you can buffer the need for certainty. So for example, I just had a big launch program myself, and I had a lot of people who are very hesitant to commit to the 6-month program because they said, I don't know what the world's gonna look like in 6 months, and I'm really hesitant to do that. So in that instance, just trying to get underneath what's going on for them, what's that emotional thing for them, and how can I meet that need in a different way. So the A in SCARF stands for autonomy. So are you giving people choices where possible? And that becomes a nice buffer for certainty. So, you know, if we're having trouble helping people really have all of the detail and all of the context, giving them an option to make a choice can be a nice alternative for people.
Can you elaborate on that one? So what, because, and I should have told you, a lot of the people in this audience are in direct sales, network marketing. So not so much coaching clients, some of them, but they're more, I want to say when they first are in this relationship building side, it's very, I don't want to say surface, but it's different. Like when I'm talking to someone about coaching, I'm like, where's the blocks? Let's talk, right?
Right.
If I'm talking to someone about joining my team or as a customer, it's a little bit, I feel like we don't go there, but I want to give people a permission to start that deeper level. So as far as autonomy, can you elaborate on giving people choices?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on the structure, it could be you choose the different structure of your program, depending on where you are and how flexible you want to be. So that could be one option. The other thing, like I'm trying to think so it may be giving people a choice as to how long they opt in or how long they can opt out. It could be a choice of, I realize you have a conflict at this point in time. Here are 2 more options for when we can get together and meet. Mm-hmm. So that's one way, or just offering ways of flexibility, just a couple of different options there. Okay,
that's awesome. And with the uncertainty, and I know this is something you're passionate about, my audience, like me, we're a lot of us are empaths, we feel things, but also, you know, I have a lot of moms in the audience, so we're managing motherhood. A lot of my girls just went back to school, but a lot of us have had our kids home for 6-7 months. It's been hard. It's been really hard on all of us. There have been many tears shed. And I think that we are not talking about that enough. And I think that understanding where people are coming from is a really important when it comes to when you're getting into this deeper part of a conversation. So for those that are struggling with anxiety, depression, all the stuff that everyone's going through, but the uncertainty, how can they do a better job of not only honoring how they're feeling, but understanding how to communicate to others in a way that feels authentic. Because I think there's a little bit of, we're just not acknowledging that and talking about that.
You know, that's something I see come up a lot with my clients, and it stood out to me. It was really interesting because I have quite a few clients over in the APAC region. So they started seeing the effects of kind of the COVID fallout 3 or 4 months before we did. And I had instances where people were literally going to the hospital because we saw the depression wave. And so we tried to get ahead of that by providing people with some tools. And as you said, how do you take care of yourself when you're in the middle of that? And how do we put our own oxygen mask on first so we have something to give to others? And I think that's where the scarf comes in. So this is just as much about other people as it about asking yourself. And so the R, I think, that I haven't quite gotten to is relatedness. So how are we building that rapport with people? And it's so fundamental to us as humans to have these dialogue, to have relationships, and that's shifted for us. And I think that's part of the drain that people are seeing. But I think just leveraging situations like this where you can get together with people who are trying to make a difference and really trying to get ahead of what's really going on for people can be very effective. So I'll get into that, but in just a second, I'll answer a little bit more detail. The F in SCARF stands for fairness. And it's not fairness like, I can't believe you did that. It's not that kind of, it's really just our justice sensor. Is, I imagine as a mom, you're playing mom, you're playing teacher, you're playing business owner, and there's not anybody really to help. And so that can feel unfair. So that's where that may be coming up for people. And it's okay, I'll normalize the fairness part. But I think some of what we call buffering is it does start with you. So out of those, what we call social threat and reward signals, where is that showing up for you? Do you not feel valued right now? Kind of going back to this status, are you struggling to find your place? And how might you be able to get that need met for yourself? And then the same thing for C with certainty and autonomy. Right now, you probably don't feel like you have a choice, or at least when the kids were forced with you to be at home, you couldn't just send them to school or some of the other options that were available. So I think at that point in time, it's thinking through, how can I give myself some perception of choice? Is it that you have choice over your schedule? Or your kids have access to you? Okay, you can choose to have access to mom. At this point in time, of course, there may be emergencies, but trying to build those things into getting your own needs met. And then, of course, the relationship part, really making room and being intentional about connecting, because that has been shifted for us.
Absolutely. So with the seeing the value in yourself, would you say, because a lot of what I teach is how to build on social media and offer value and figure that out. And there's resistance sometimes, guys, on that, because they feel like, who am I? What do I have to share? And, they just feel like they're being bold and it's uncomfortable. And they feel like if they're being vulnerable, like they're afraid. But would you say it's fair to say that if they can't really see value in others and kind of bring that forth if they're not seeing it in themselves. So are they potentially almost attracting people, maybe not the right people to them, or people who, like, I feel like if you are feeling confident and you're, you know, and the confidence will come, but you're putting yourself out there and you're offering value, are you more equipped to potentially see value in others and call that forth in those conversations?
There's a really fascinating concept, and I love the art and science dynamic. And I think sometimes we talk about it more from the art, like law of attraction and some of those things. There's a scientific reason that this happens. And there's something called priming in the brain. So if you think back to maybe a purse that you love, or like a car that you really loved, and you maybe purchased it and suddenly you started seeing it everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You ever had that happen?
Mm-hmm.
It's so like, oh, there's so many of these cars. That's called priming. And then we build that through something called a confirmation bias. So when we create that powerful intention and when we really tap into our why, it primes our brain to spot those opportunities when we're interacting with others. So it's a law of attraction, but there's a scientific reason for it. And it works the other way as well. So if we are saying to ourselves, I'm not enough, I don't have anything to value, guess what? We're going to look for evidence to confirm that.
Wow. That's huge. That's awesome. So with the choices, and I know it's not so much about conversation, but I think your mental health, everybody trumps everything we're talking about here. So if you're not mentally where you need to be, it's going to be so much harder to do all these things tactically that you learn from me and you know, other trainers. So when it comes to choices, and I've even felt this, I think that there's a lot of frustration and paralysis that we create for ourselves when we feel like we don't have choices, which is the autonomy piece. Mm-hmm. So for example, when we were home for a couple months and we were homeschooling and it was not going well, like we would end up in tears because I would rather talk to adults than a 5-year-old, you know, and it was not working. And then I was like, it's going to be worth the money for me to find someone to come over a few hours a week to do the rest of her school. And I found someone and she came and we finished the last 3 weeks with this other person. No more tears, but she finished kindergarten. Yay. But it allowed me to get that stress and that anxiety and that frustration of like, I am a bad mom, you know, off the table. And then I was energized. And then I got time for myself to work on my business and do the things that I love. And so then I was a better mom. Like, it was crazy, but it didn't even dawn on me. It didn't even dawn on me to say, wait a minute, it's true, they're home right now, but what are the options here? And I think for you guys that are syncing with your time and you're just like, oh, I'm all over the place, and you have options, but we don't stop to think about those options. And I think that I love that piece of this. I mean, I love all of it, but I really love that piece of it. It is almost like we need to get back in the driver's seat of our life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know, and I think a lot of us, that feeling of powerlessness, there's a really fascinating, one of my favorite talks when I was in grad school was about learned helplessness. I don't know if you all have heard about that concept, but there was a study done and there were these mice and they would just gradually move their food out of the way to where they couldn't reach it and they couldn't reach it. And over time, they moved the food back close enough, but the mice had learned that the food was out of reach and they quit trying.
Chills. Oh, gosh. Oh.
And I think that can become a reality in our lives so easily that, you know, at least for a time right now, it felt like choice without a toy. I said it backwards. That choice was out of reach, rather. Or that time for ourselves was out of reach. But it could be that little food or that little option is closer than we think if we just try and think of another way to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So for more tactical question for you, because your strength is, I mean, you're superhuman with your knowledge and just understanding people. And a lot of the people here stumbled into what they're doing. Like for me, I started my business because we were in 6 figures of debt and our salaries were not adding up. So I got into it, but I had experience in sales and leadership, and that's why, it's been an easier journey for me. But a lot of the people on here are either introverts, they don't feel comfortable talking to people, or they don't want to be weird. So for those that are on social media, maybe they have a new friend request or they're in a Facebook group connecting with other moms, what would you say to them to help them to talk to people easier in Messenger and on social media?
Yeah, I almost think there's a pre-step, and it goes in some ways back to the priming. And I talk a lot about it in the work that I do with my clients as well. So I'll tell them myself, I am a big nerdy introvert, and it was so hard for me to connect with people. So a couple years back when I got my new job, I was struggling to make it relatable to my clients. I'm like, I've got to do something. And so I decided to take a storytelling class. And where that came from was I don't know if you all know the podcast called The Moth. Some of you may have heard of it. It's a storytelling podcast, a big organization. So I wrote on the sticky note on my goals wall, mesmerized at the moth. And it wasn't about winning. Well, of course that would be nice. It wasn't about that. What it meant to me was I was willing to put myself out there and be seen. And that was the biggest part of it. And it was a journey. But about a year after that, I won what's called a story slam by sharing my story. And a lot of it had to do with that theme of being seen. And so I think the back step, the foundational work, is knowing your why. And you probably do that in your program. But if you come from your place of your why and it feels authentic to you, it's easier to make those connections with others. So that's what you're putting out. I think it's those, for me, if I could look at it like I was adding value to people's life and just genuinely saying, oh, I've struggled with something similar. How is that showing up for you? Those really practical little steps.
Yeah, absolutely. So when someone is connecting with a prospect and they're, having an opportunity to share with them, how are you, because you study this and you teach people how to stand out with their story, mm-hmm. where does their story come into the conversation?
A lot of times I use it in a couple of places. So it's in almost all of my copy to some degree. So as far as like what's on my website and that, and then I think in the conversation is probably like a couple of bullet points in, really, of like, what are you trying to achieve? And if they say something along the lines of, this feels scary for me to put myself out there, then I can say, oh, I wrestled with something similar. Would you like me to share my story of how I overcame that? So my why story is really me overcoming my introverted nature and being seen. So it becomes more natural at that point.
That's awesome. Okay. So when y'all are talking to someone, you do need to know their pain point. Like, what is the struggle? So if you post something on social media, or they respond to something in a group, or you're running a challenge, like there's all these different ways we can bring people into our world, but we need to know what their pain point is. And you don't necessarily have to have had the same experience, but you can either share about someone else you've helped or find the commonalities of their situation with yours, and inviting them to say, hey, I'd love to share with you, my experience. And sometimes it's pretty simple. Like if it's a product and it's weight loss, like, you can just share it. But the key is, one is to know what in your story can you bring. So here's an example. If I'm talking to someone and she says, oh my goodness, I'm going through menopause right now, and I swear to you, I look at a piece of bread and I gain weight. Well, I haven't gone through menopause yet, but I've worked with clients as a nutritionist, and I have lots of testimonials of customers, but I can draw from what she said to pivot the conversation so she knows I heard her. So she's like, okay. And I can say, girl, that's not in your head. It's a real thing. Like as we age, our metabolism goes down, or hormones, all the things. But now I'm able to shift my conversation to talk about her and let her know you're not alone. And this is what other people have done. Would you like to talk more about that? So for you saying about the storytelling, that in real life, you guys, is exactly how you can do that. You never, ever, ever want to just put it on them, because you don't know. Like, what if you tell them a story and they're completely offended by it because it has nothing to do with your situation, right? Or maybe you're talking about homeschooling kids and it's been so hard, and that's why you have this online business, and they're like, oh, you don't know if they don't have children because they had a miscarriage. Is that a good conversation to have with that person? Probably not. And that's shame on us, shame on us for not digging in a little bit more with it. So when you're teaching people how to stand out with their story, do you, at that point, so they're sharing their story, how do they move it along to invite to work with them or, become a customer?
Yeah, I'll see if I can give an example. Usually I have people craft about 5 to 6 stories from their life, so it makes it much easier to find something that's relevant or find that authentic point of connection. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. But I think the shift is, it sounds like you're struggling with something similar. This is how I've done this. Does it sound like something, would you like to talk more about how I overcame this or how this client overcame this? So it's like a natural shift once you do the story, because people are we have areas of our brain that are wired to listen to story, and we love narrative. So the more that we can create that narrative for people, they're already with you. They just they're transported into your journey. So it becomes like a natural shift over to how you can help them be the hero of their own journey, really.
Mm-hmm. And it's also more memorable, isn't it? Like people will remember your story, or at least how you made them feel. I've heard that before. Is that accessing a different part of the brain? Because I was just doing a YouTube training last night I recorded, and I talked about the Think Up app is, it's affirmations you record, but it's your own voice, but also how I like to do vision movies to music. So Coldplay, Paradise, the live version's mine. But I've heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that like if someone has dementia or Alzheimer's, they'll remember songs and they'll be dancing and they'll remember the song, but they don't even know their children's names. Is that true that like stories and all of that access a different part of the brain?
Yes. And I talk about this all in kind of my program.
Oh, cool.
I'm going to try not to nerd out too much on you in the interest of time.
No, they love it.
So our memory is really fascinating, and we're learning more and more, even since I've been in grad school. But in the past couple of years, what we've realized is that we are embedding short-term and long-term memory at the same time. It doesn't have to go through short-term first. So you can shortcut that short-term memory and almost go straight to long-term memory when you create it's a meaningful moment is how I phrase it in my course. But it's really those day-to-day memories, those things, those human exchanges. Those are the things that we remember the most. And that's because we've embedded them into our episodic memory, as opposed to just a general representation of something. So what you see in dementia, there's a type of dementia called semantic dementia, and you all may have heard of that. But semantic memory is how we represent concepts. So if you have a damage to your semantic memory, if I showed you a picture of a horse, you may call it a dog because that's the most common representation of that. And so with a story, you're able to bypass some of that and just get into those deeper long-term memories.
Holy cow, that's awesome. That is amazing. Yeah. So you guys, I mean, the power of stories is unbelievable. So I'll ask one more question if that's okay. So a lot of the people listening on here have teams, or they're I think some of them are attracting people that are not qualified to join their team. They're not in a situation financially. I mean, let's face it, most network marketing direct sales it's a lot of the programs cost a good amount of money. So they may or may not be attracting the right people to them, or when they're working with people on their team, because a lot of us are empaths, or we feel, or we're just sensitive. What would you recommend to still be empathetic to people, but not get caught in the drama? Like, is there a way to keep the conversation healthy if you notice that that's happening?
Yes, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, putting our oxygen masks off. So if you think through when you're needing to have a difficult conversation with someone, if you can go back to SCARF acronym or something that works for you and saying, whoa, why am I so upset by this? So like I've had a very real one come up for me in the past couple of weeks is I felt like the workload distribution was unfair. Like a lot more was coming back to me because my team wasn't doing it and I needed to have a conversation with them. So I had to recognize, what do I need? How can I meet that need? There's a sense of justice. And so for me, it was meeting my own need first and then asking my team, what's showing up for you? I noticed, and once I met my own need, I wasn't accusatory. It was a place of curiosity rather than judgment. And when we can have those conversations with our team from places of curiosity, we show up in a very different way.
It's so true. Versus coming at them. Like I was just listening to someone was speaking at a conference, an online conference, and she was talking about, she used to get on her team Zooms and she was looking around to see who wasn't on because she was mad, right? Like, where are they? Versus being like, one, curious, right? But also saying, who's here right now? Who's showing up that I can serve? And I feel like how we manage, or not manage, but how we lead others and manage our emotions through that, there's that emotional intelligence. I think that's a sign of emotional intelligence. And if you're listening and you're really frustrated with your team, or you're like, gosh, I bring people on, they just quit. That's that whole projecting. I think it's a healthy exercise to go through SCARF for yourself and to say, what's going on for me and what do I need? And then start with that and then come from a place of curiosity. Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah. And I'll resolve that. So then I flipped it for my team and I'm like, I noticed this. Can you share more what's happening? And she told me I was trying to prove myself. It was a status thing for her. She didn't want to have to come back and ask me, even though she needed to ask me for more clarity because she was wanting to really prove herself. So I really built up that a sign of leadership, a sign of being valued is knowing when to ask for help and creating that safe space. And we had a great resolution to that.
Yeah. And for those, and conflict is really hard for people. A lot of us are drawn to network marketing because we're yellow personalities, and network marketing is like a helper. And when you have to confront it. Like, I am a huge advocate of do not let that go because it just gets worse. It doesn't go away. But what I learned a long time ago, and this sounds like what you just said, is you still need to focus on something positive to start the conversation, address what it is. And then, like you said, you were like, that's leadership, what you were doing. That's great. This is how we need to do that differently next time. But would you agree that like going to the brain piece, is that is there a reason why? Is that just so people don't have their guard up, or so they still feel seen? Is there a reason why we need to make sure we're still focusing on the positive?
Yeah, so we think back to amygdala hijack from our very beginning. Just by you being the boss of someone, there is a power differential, and you're automatically going to shift whoever you're talking to into a little bit of a threat state. And so when we're in amygdala hijack, we're in so much threat that the rational part of our brain that could actually process what you as the boss are telling me is gone offline. So one of our goals is to create safety to get people out of amygdala hijack so they can actually think through and process what we're talking about. So that's what you're kind of seeing behind the scenes.
Or with my husband.
No, it works everywhere.
I'm like, I can see that, because if sometimes I'm like, and then I'm like, hey, this, and it's a conversation, it's no big deal. But if I'm like, you know, coming at him or he's coming at me, so just that healthy conversation and dialogue. Okay, so this has been amazing, and it's different, it's refreshing. It's like we need to stop and really just reflect sometimes and ask ourselves, how are we doing, and how can we show up better for others? What for those listening that are like, oh my goodness, this is all new to me, I'm loving this, how can they find out more about you? Are you on social media? How can they get connected with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some people have already connected me, so thank you. That's wonderful. I have my Neuroscience of Storytelling Facebook group.
Oh, awesome.
And we're just building out the other platforms, so not quite there yet. We offer so much free stuff as far as better communication, crafting and honing your messages, how to make them really relate. So that's a great place. It's Neuroscience of Storytelling Collective.
Neuroscience story. Okay. And then what I'll do, guys, is I will include that. I'll find it and get the link from you or on Facebook, and I'll put it in the replay. So we'll create an unlisted YouTube and we'll email this all out to you guys. So don't worry about searching and hunting for it. We'll get it for you. And the freebies are inside the Facebook group?
Yes. There are some freebies inside the Facebook group.
Okay, cool, which is good. That's how it should be set up. Good job. Well, Jay, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been so impactful and meaningful to me. And I know you're so busy, and you're just doing a lot of good out there, and it's making a difference. And just to love on my people for a little bit, it means a lot to us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This has been a delight, and I'd love to, keep our conversation going and help your group.
Oh yeah, we would love to have you back. And everyone that was able to be on live or watch the replay, thank you so much. Implement this, do your own reflection on the SCARF model, and I'd love to see you guys showing up in a more meaningful way. So thank you everyone for being on. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.